Welcome to my virtual diner. Pull up a seat at the counter, get comfortable. Most shows talk about the people, and I talk to them. This is Real America with me, Bridget Phetasy. Charlie Kirk's memorial was last Sunday, and it has America talking about faith. And before we descend into calling for war and labeling our enemies evil, I'd like to stop and consider the ripple effect of this moment. Because something happened when Charlie was violently assassinated in front of the whole world. There's been a lot of talk of a revival. This word has been thrown around a lot this past week. More than 100 million people across the world streamed Charlie Kirk's memorial. According to Turning Point spokesman, their tech partners tracked over 277,000 devices in and around State Farm Stadium the day of the event. Thousands of people have commented that this event and/or Charlie's assassination brought them back to their faith or opened the door to it for the first time ever. One comment on a recent dumpster fire read, "After being a lifelong atheist, I attended church for the first time on Sunday, partly because of Charlie's assassination, partly because of the demons celebrating his death." Allie Beth Stuckey, a Christian conservative author and podcaster, asked her audience, "If you became a Christian after watching or listening to Charlie Kirk, please reply below with some of your story." She said this on X, and she received hundreds of messages. One person said, "I was raised secular, never baptized, but Charlie, and especially what's happened in the last 2 weeks, have really made my wife and I look inward. I'm not particularly spiritual, but I'm really thinking about attending church for my daughter and her future." As I said on X, to quite a bit of pushback, I'm seeing the media try to grapple with what happened yesterday, and it dawns on me that they have no framework for this. If anyone in America has lacked representation, it's people of faith. Belief in God has been mocked and trivialized. It's a punchline at best. Of course, elites can't understand or relate to the aesthetic. It's the same reason they had to go to rural diners after Trump won in 2016 like they were going to the zoo. It's a large part of America that exists that people in media and entertainment would prefer to ignore. Admittedly, it was a spectacle. Charlie liked spectacle. He liked pyrotechnics, so they honored him by having them at his memorial. And as there were so many people who wanted to attend, it was in a stadium, a dream of Charlie's. So people were moved by the music, and they were also wandering around eating nachos. There was a mega church meets influencer vibe with a lineup of speakers ranging from the phenomenal pastor Frank Turek to podcaster Benny Johnson. And then, of course, were all the politicians mixed in. Marco Rubio, Tulsi Gabbard, Susan Wiles, as JD Vance was there. And as he said, "I have talked more about Jesus Christ in the past 2 weeks than I have in my entire time in public life." And then there was his wife, Erica Kirk. Erica Kirk gave a moving, now very viral speech forgiving the young man who killed her husband and father to their kids. It was a living testament to what Christianity preaches. Forgive us our trespasses and forgive as we forgive those who trespass against us. Most people were moved by it. Other people thought she was acting. And then there was the grand finale, Trump, who just couldn't help being Trump. In between joking about how he hates his opponents, he teased an autism announcement and talked about tariffs. It was like he kept forgetting he was at a funeral and would randomly say Charlie to remind himself. So when a friend who had only seen clips of it said she felt like the whole thing was psychotic, I totally get it. I understand reacting to it negatively because it's a mediated mashup of cults of personality, politics, and gospel. It can be hard to separate that message from the messenger. And if you already hate MAGA, well, you're really going to hate this. And I get the instinct to resist it all. Thomas Chatterton Williams said, to much dunking, "I've spent half of my adult life living in one foreign country or another, and I don't think I've ever felt so estranged from the surrounding culture as I am from the aesthetics and sensibilities of this movement. Not even a criticism. I just feel more at home in Greece than in these images." I get that too. It's also a long-winded way of saying you're a snob. But my Gen X mind cannot comprehend this madness for a completely different reason. Charlie was speaking to kids in college when he was killed, and he was huge in that demographic. He was much bigger than I think most people realized or even realize still. He was changing the hearts and minds of the youth because he was taking the time to do the outreach. But what truly boggles my mind as a dirtbag Gen Xer is that young people are now drinking and trying to get laid. This isn't something I have a framework for. The culture is so degenerate that kids are rebelling by going to church and voting Republican. This is new, it's crazy, but it also says a lot about what's going on in America right now. And Charlie was doing the work. He was reaching out to these kids. He was a living example of the ideals this country was built upon. But more than that, he was converting hearts and minds to Christianity. Politics and faith are woven into the fabric of our nation. Charlie knew how to parse this and use it to inspire young people, to give them meaning. Navigating the intersection of faith and politics requires wisdom and restraint, which Charlie had in spades. When faith informs politics without dominating it, it can inspire ethical governance and compassion. But when either seeks to control the other, the results can be exclusionary or authoritarian, as we've seen in the past. Millions of people have also been hurt by the church, and historically, we've seen many religious wars that continue to play out today. So again, I get people's kind of aversion to it. I've dealt with this myself in my own long journey with faith, which I'm not going to bore you with right now. Faith and politics will continue to shape each other for better or worse and demand ongoing dialogue to foster mutual respect and shared purpose. But this mutual respect was violated when Charlie was murdered. Something broke. I still can't believe it. And I don't think there is a big enough personality to hold this tension quite like Charlie did, because he was truly grounded in his faith. He was able to foster conversations with people with whom he disagreed. He truly believed we were all children of God, and he outsourced that judgment to God. There's something incredibly powerful about the example that he set. And the more I think about faith, the less it makes sense to me. And I'm curious to hear from you. What is it? What is faith to you? How do we navigate the intersection of politics and faith? How do we bring this nation together? Do we need faith to keep America together? To help me with this conversation, my guest tonight is Ben Howe. He's the author of The Immoral Majority: Why Evangelicals Chose Political Power Over Christian Values. He's also a dumpster fire contributor and editor, and he makes political ads. But first, before we get to it, some quick housekeeping. If you want to be called on, you need to be on Zoom on camera, and you need to virtually raise your hand by clicking the reactions button. If you aren't on Zoom and want to be a part of our virtual live audience right now or in the future, click the link in the description below to get the Zoom link, or go to tway.tv/BridgetZoom. The Zoom link is the same every week, guys, so save it somewhere. This is your virtual diner. The voice of God you will hear is Cousin Maggie.
Hello, everyone.
Many of you already know her and are familiar with her. She's my cousin, co-producer. We make a lot of our stuff together, like Dumpster Fire, Walk-ins Welcome, and all the other content you can find at Phetasy.com if you're new to our empire. Maggie will be monitoring, it's a cul-de-sac. Maggie will be monitoring the chat. If you have something to say and you raise your hand, she will privately message you to find out what you'd like to talk about. Maggie's going to help make sure we stay on topic. She might interrupt me or you. We can't guarantee we'll get to everybody, but we do our best. And you have to be on camera, guys, too. This isn't anonymous. The point is to see each other's facial expressions. Everyone knows my number one rule is don't be a dick. So please try and let God be the judge, and everything will be fine. And now, a word from our sponsor, Quest. Guys, in these sad, weird, dark times, also revival times, we should all be taking care of each other and taking care of ourselves. I'm trying to make my health a priority, and that's why I love Quest. Quest simplifies the medical testing process significantly, especially if you're dealing with an HMO like I am. No more waiting weeks for an appointment to see my doctor, and then you have to get a referral, and then wait more time, and then get an appointment with the specialist. Quest offers over 150 of the same tests trusted by doctors, including diagnostics for specific ailments like STDs, chronic conditions like heart, liver, and kidney disease, as well as testing that is almost never covered by health insurance, like fertility and advanced women's hormone testing. Quest also offers broad packages of tests that go way beyond the standard tests you typically get, and an annual medical checkup visit. Concierge medicine and functional medicine doctors charge thousands of dollars for these types of workups, and Quest offers them for the price of a night out on the town. Your health and well-being is worth it. We need you here. Visit questhealth.com and use a discount code RealMay25 and get 20% off your purchase. That's questhealth.com, code RealMay25 for 20% off. There's a link in the description below. All right, let's bring in our guest, Ben Howe, and get into it. I'm so curious where everybody is with the Maggie made me disappear. It's probably appropriate. I'll just defer to a man and let him take over from here.
Yes, it's good that you brought me so that I can let you know what you should think about faith.
What do you think about faith?
Well, I actually have always had a issue with the word because it's become synonymous for the secular world for faith to be almost an insult. Like they love saying blind faith. People say that all the time. Some of us live by blind faith, I guess. And my response is usually, okay, I'm not an idiot. I think the things I think because I've read and I've thought and I've used my own logic and reasoning and I've looked at the world around me and thousands of years of history, I think agree with me. It's not blind. It's just informed by what I see and live.
Do you think that it's also a little bit of an insult from people who don't have any faith?
Yeah, I mean, the classic thing to point out is that when it comes to certain elements of science, you have to have faith. I mean, we can't go back and observe what happened 5 billion years ago. So if you're saying that X, Y, or Z happened before the Big Bang, something had to happen, then you have to have a measure of faith, whether or not you say it's a God or not. I just have found that faith has been weaponized a lot to be patronizing. And I would love to take the word back because it really should have it should give people comfort. They should find comfort in their faith and not feel foolish for saying they have it.
That's where I feel like, as someone who's Gen X, what I was saying in my monologue, like not having a framework for this, I kind of came of age. You and I are relatively the same age. I kind of came of age during this kind of snarky, religion is silly. It was there. We had the moral majority, as you kind of allude to in the title of your book. So it wasn't like it wasn't like it wasn't there, but it was definitely something the mainstream culture looked down on. And I don't feel like that's changed at all.
No.
It's always been a little bit of a punchline. You've got shows like Righteous Gemstones. As somebody who,
The unfortunate truth is there are a lot of idiots that make it easy to take shots at Christians. I mean,
right.
You've seen them. You've seen Jimmy Swaggart crying on TV after he got caught with a prostitute and had just been excoriating however many people for other pastors for committing immoralities. So a lot of these caricatures they have of Christians have uncomfortable reality associated with them. But
well, yeah, and then you have everything that's happened and come out in like the Catholic Church that was,
yes.
We also came of age during the time when Sinead O'Connor was probably one of the earliest people ever canceled, and she was canceled for ripping a picture of the Pope on national live television, something I'll never forget. And was destroyed for that. Like her career was destroyed. She wasn't welcome back on anything. And then she was trying to tell us
some bad stuff was going on with you don't have to look hard to find things in the church that are disturbing. And I think that I talked about this a little bit in the book where I was pointing out that it's sort of circular, but it is true. A Christian believes that we are fallen, that we are sinful, that we are by nature going to lean towards doing the wrong thing. The fact that a lot of Christians do is just sort of evidence that we're right. Like, yes, it's true. People screw up and sometimes are evil and use religion as a way to control others. All those things really happen. I think that, for me personally, faith, I was lucky. The people I grew up around, for instance, the Frank Turek, who was Charlie Kirk's mentor, he was a colleague of my father. And those types of guys were all around me when I was growing up. So I didn't get exposed as much to the, righteous gemstones type stuff. I was
Right.
mostly around much more, the kinds of people that, like, when they talk, you really listen. And it just gave me a different view of faith, which I think is very faith as being very informed. And, so many people look at faith as being uninformed. They look at it as being uneducated. And I grew up in a world where it was the exact opposite. My dad had a PhD and all of his colleagues did, and they were very educated. And this is the conclusion they came to. There is a God and he loves you.
We actually did an interview on Watkins Welcome with what was his name again? I always blank. The guy who's the interview got deleted with the he was
Nick Nisley.
Nick Nisley. He's the Bishop of Rhode Island and Episcopalian Bishop of Rhode Island. And he comes from like he's an astrophysicist who basically, the more he went down into the science rabbit hole, which you see this with Einstein and a lot of these guys, that
Yeah.
they find that it just proves the existence of God. Now, I do have a question too, because Frank Turek was somebody who explained something that I was raised Catholic. I always joke and call myself a recovering Catholic when I'm in AA meetings. And he
Let me
talked
pause you
about
before you ask and let you know that I am no Frank Turek. Go ahead. So
no,
if
I don't know what apologetics are. So I keep seeing
oh,
this and I don't know
okay.
what it is. I think
It,
a
it,
lot
it
of
means
people, I mean, unless you're in this, I don't know what it is.
it means explanation. It means explaining something. And it's synonymous with educated theology. I mean, my dad teaches apologetics. So for instance, he wrote a book called When Critics Ask with Dr. Norman Geisler. And what it does is it goes through each and every a contradiction that they could find in the Bible and provides explanations for it as to why that would be. So that is apologetics, the
See,
explanation of what needs to be understood.
I needed this when I was getting kicked out of Bible school for pointing out there were contradictions.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you feel about your book? How did
In
this make
hindsight,
you? I mean, how did this make you feel? You wrote this
the
book. You come from
mhm,
the right.
mhm.
You saw what was happening with the right and evangelicals. You wrote a book about it. How do you feel in this moment?
Well, I will tell you this. When I wrote my book, um, it was after a few years of being very frustrated with the right. What I saw on the right was a lot of people making what I thought were excuses for anything and everything Trump did. And essentially saying that because he was serving some greater purpose, that he could get away with it. And my concern was that it was sort of giving him like a sin pass. Like he could do whatever he wanted as long as he was serving this great interest for us. And the more spiritual people got about defending him, the more wary I got of what was going on. So when I wrote the book, what I was basically saying was, don't go into the voting booth and believe that you're voting for the party of God. Go into the voting booth because you are taking your faith with you in everything that you do and let it inform what you're doing, but you're not pulling the lever for or against God when you're going in there. There
Right.
isn't one party who gets to claim ownership of God. However, I will say in this moment, it is hard not to go, never mind, there is one party that has God, and it's these guys over here, the ones not shooting people. Like that it is hard not to get to that point. I'm keeping myself in check a little bit and letting the grief, because I knew Charlie, and like, this has been profoundly had an effect on me. So I'm letting the grief pass for a little bit, but my feeling as of now is that if there was a time where Donald Trump's persona was uncalled for because he was too much of a asshole, um, it was because at that time people didn't need that much of an asshole. But there is a part of me that's going, okay, maybe we need this much of an asshole given the way things are going. Like, and I
Yeah.
haven't figured out where I'm coming out yet on that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I get it. I've been Little Miss captain of the fence riding team for 10 years, and only recently when I just wrote a piece about this, kind of came to the conclusion that um, there's no such thing as too far left. So how do you check that? I don't know any other way other than to set to give the right more power. But then I sometimes feel like the left is just not going to check themselves, and then they're going to force the right to, and then it becomes like this self-fulfilling prophecy of fascism or whatever. And yeah, I feel confused.
Well, there's
But
an
what?
element of what you said to me the other day, which was that you know, it's so little these days about ideology. It's really crazy people and not crazy people. And I had a problem with a lot of the people on the right that I thought were crazy, but I don't. I have. I find what the left is showing you these days to be much more concerning type of crazy. Like somebody saying something that I think is nuts is very different than somebody doing something I think is nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you said too is what always creeps people out when there's this church and state and they are working together. There
Mhm.
is that idea of like you are going and voting for God or you're voting against God, and we know how that plays out. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that the founders' idea was definitely that the culture is going to be reflected in our government. And so if more Christians are electing Christians, then the type of legislation and lawmaking and everything is going to lean more in a Christian way. And as a Christian, you should want that, and that's fine. But I think that what they didn't count on was the amount of people who would just use religion and not really believe it, but just use it in order to win an election. And that's where it starts to get dangerous, and why I have cautioned against tying faith too directly to one party is it starts to just become a special interest. It starts to
mm.
become like the same as any, these guys are the party of lowering taxes and God, and so then that means what? When you're voting for the other party, you're voting against God, I guess. Like it's odd and
Yeah.
and dangerous, I think.
Yeah, and when I think about it, the right was always kind of associated with as the God Party,
Oh,
even in my
actually, you'd be
youth.
surprised. It was really in the 70s that really started to take off. Like,
Mm,
first of all, most of the political parties, both political parties and everyone, were more directly faithful publicly in the decades past. But in the 70s was about when a lot of what you think of as the modern political evangelical sort of came onto the scene. And part of the reason they came onto the scene was because Jimmy Carter was very much a Southern evangelical. He was a Christian and was known for his faith, etc. But Jerry Falwell and a lot of the other pastors that formed the moral majority were like he does not represent us. He does not
mm,
represent what they believe was the moral majority. That was when the very first, like, when I was doing the research for the book, that was one of the first times that I could find where the same thing we heard in 2016, how people would say anybody but Hillary. They were saying that about Carter.
right.
And I think it was Falwell actually who said, I'd vote for the devil himself if he was the VP, as long as it got Jimmy Carter out of office. And I think that's a little crazy.
Well, we have a lot of hands up, so I want to hear from the people who have questions or thoughts about this topic. I'm so curious where I am curious too, like what it all looks like in 2 years. Is there some kind of faith revival
I know it's
in?
gonna it's gonna be a barren wasteland, and you and I are gonna be on motorized bicycles looking for fuel.
That's pretty fast, but yeah, it might be.
Um, all right, guys, just a reminder to people who have raised their hands, I have messaged you separately, so please just reply to me and let me know what you would like to talk about. First, I'm going to bring up Alan. Let me
Hello,
unmute you
Alan.
here. Here we go.
Hi, Bridget. Hi, Ben.
Hi. And Ben, feel free to jump in.
So I've been a Christian for about half my life now, for about 20 years. And you were asking earlier, Bridget, why faith? What makes it go? What makes it tick? As a Christian, faith is something that's given to us apart from a moving of the Holy Spirit. We're not really given faith. We can't have faith unless it's given to us. We can go through like rituals and stuff thinking that we've been raised this way or this is like the moral thing to do. But for a lot of us, it's not something that's given to us. That's why they call it a free gift. That's why grace is a gift. There's a, I don't know, like as Christians, we're supposed to kind of accept, I'm trying to look for the word, accept like teasing, persecution. We're told to expect it. Jesus said himself that the world hated me. What do you think they're going to do to you? That's a really bad paraphrase, but that's essentially what he told his followers. And with faith being put down by prevailing culture, it's like it's always weird. Like you guys brought up earlier with the righteous gemstones kind of thing and the televangelist. Like I'm not a megachurch guy. Like I go to a church that has 300 people and it feels big to me.
Yeah.
I'm not used to big church settings. And so, and that's probably pretty rare for somebody who's a Christian in Dallas, Texas, because it seems like everybody goes to a mega church. But the why faith matters is that what Ben was saying, like there are things that give you reasons to believe and to hold on to that faith. There's an apologist and a Bible scholar from Canada named Wesley Huff. I think he's been on Joe Rogan recently. And he talks about like the concrete evidence, the concrete transcripts that we have of the Bible, knowing that no, we can have trust that this came from the first century, this came from the author. We can believe in these things that were passed down in the scriptures because we can trace it all the way back and we can trust the language. And I think, I guess through my meandering and rambling, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
I really think there's like this revival going on because people have had their faith weaponized against them, saying, "Oh, you should be meek and mild. You can't get angry about anything." And I think for a lot of people is, I mean, they're fed up. They're not going to be quiet anymore, whether that's about their political belief or about their faith. Like I never really knew of Charlie Kirk. I knew of his name. I watched the South Park episode, and that was my exposure to Charlie Kirk. And then when he was killed in a previous town I lived in, which is still crazy to think about, it was, I don't know, like I started watching his stuff and like this guy who was killed was talking more about his faith than he was talking about politics.
Yeah.
And for me, that's just like they're gonna kill us anyway. Why not just go out doing it? Being it who just, they're gonna kill us, just be who you are, kind of thing. Yeah, be true to who God made you really, and how
Do
God
you
made you
feel
a real
like you've
person.
had to hide who you are?
And in the corporate world, yeah, 100% has to go along with all the stuff that goes on in June and all the things that a Christian probably would not agree with lifestyle wise. But you just grin and bear it, just say, okay, yeah, this is great, while you're dying on the inside slowly. But like in some parts of the country that I've lived in, they've always asked, why do you believe? And there's been some derision with that, and kind of like say, well, I'm not one of those kind of Christians, and sheepishly lying, not letting them know, no, I am one of those Christians. I believe the Bible is true. I believe Jesus rose on the third day. I believe everything he said. And so I think for a lot of us millennials and some of the other, Gen Z, I think they're just fed up of just being bullied, and they're just going to just be vocal about who they are.
All right. I like that. Do you have kids?
I have 2 kids. Yeah. I'm actually at my daughter's softball practice right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's great.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for
Thank you,
tuning
guys.
in.
Thanks, Alan.
I always forget about that stuff because this is where, like, again, my brain is so progressive. Default setting progressive is that it never occurred to me until this moment that people don't agree with like Pride Month.
Yeah.
And have to like like silently just kind of bear it and go to work. Literally not until this month. I'm going to be honest. Like not, this is how much of a default, just to give you
Well, and also, and this is just so true, and I bet you so many people can relate to this. One of the issues is that the left of side of politics, they just assume that everybody agrees with them already. And if you go to a party or something and you're talking to people, they're going to be like, well, as soon as that scumbag gets out of the office, like they just say it right out of like no qualms at all. The people who have to hide are the ones, I think, the people who have to hide most of the time are the ones who voted for him. They're the ones who can't just be themselves when they go places. And I've experienced this by way of having, sort of this divorce with the right back in 2016, and then being treated like an exotic pet by people on the left, because I was still a conservative, but I was against the Republican nominee. And, it was like I was allowed to be a conservative around them is what it felt like. It's like I had some permission slip to be a conservative.
All right, we have a ton of hands raised, so I can't guarantee we're going to get to everyone, guys, but we're going to try. So I might have to keep these short. I'm going to bring up Jen next. Go.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
All right. Well, I had an aha moment a few years back when I took a course on biblical justice. And there are 3 types of justice in the Bible. Retributive, which is basically that people suffer the consequences for their actions. Distributive, which is a call to help those who are oppressed or poor, downtrodden. Or 3, transformative, which is kind of when God gets his way and the evil that is happening is redeemed and converted, transformed to that which is good and the way it is supposed to be. And I realized that for many Christians who can't imagine not voting the Democratic way, the scriptures that are speaking to them are the ones that are talking about the distributive type of justice that is biblical, that we care for one another, that we feed the widows, take care of the orphans, that we leave the part of the harvest on the edges of the field for the poor to come and eat from. And then there are those who are called more to the verses that are the retributive, where, there are consequences for our actions. And when you sin, there's going to be some penalties involved with that. And it just it helped me to understand better how we can all say we're Christian and this is why we believe this. But then we also maybe why we don't understand why the other side doesn't see what we're seeing. Because we're looking at one set of those with a much, let's say, more favorable lens than the other set.
So much of what you're talking
that all of it is biblical and all of it is from God.
So much of what you're talking about reminds me of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind. Have you read this?
I have not.
It's brilliant, but he talks about just the different personality types that are generally conservative or liberal, and how one is, and a lot of this has been inverted, especially around COVID. It was very strange. Generally, conservatives are more rule following. They're more respect for authority. Liberals are more, rebellious. And I wonder too if like these different kinds of justice are also one leans towards one or the other, depending. But it's all under the same. But his point is basically that we're all hypocrites, and we should all start there. Like we should, and we're all looking to like judge people.
I could you can see the types of justice you're talking about just in like the differences in churches. You go to one church and they're talking all about hell, fire, brimstone. You go to another church, they're talking about feed the poor, help the needy, and it's just, it's almost like the denominations. When I think of Methodists, They seem more like distributive. And when I think of Baptists, they seem more like the retribution focused,
Yeah, but ultimately, hopefully we all do come together in realizing that what God's desire for justice is, a people that are all redeemed.
I like that.
Thank you.
I can get down with that.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
All right. I'm going to bring up Jackie next.
I love hearing from the peoples.
Let me unmute you here, Jackie.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. I had a couple of things I wanted to share. I think people need to have faith in something. And I know there's been a lot written about, the religion of climate change, for example.
Right.
And all those things aren't going to bring you peace, like throwing soup on a painting, and all that stuff isn't really going to do anything for you at the end of the day. So I think a faith in God would be the best option. And it doesn't have to be a blind faith. So I grew up as Catholic, and there's a lot of doubt. You see, obviously, you have the doubting Thomas in the Bible, but then if you look at the saints, a lot of them struggled with their faith and all the time. Like, I think Mother Teresa had, some dark periods where she's like, what am I doing? And it was hard. And so it doesn't have to be this sort of blind, unthinking sort of thing.
I think you point to something too that I wanted to write about in my monologue, but it would have been 10,000 words. And it's basically how politics has become religion.
Yeah.
It is a stand-in for religion now. And so many people I know, they battle like it's like a spiritual battle, but this is a proxy war we're using. And it could be climate change. It could be the culture war has really become a religion of sorts.
Well, I also think that in terms of those moments of doubt, they often precede greater moments of faith. When you lose that, you think you've lost your faith. Like I told Bridget a couple of years ago, I was like, I don't know what's going on with me, but I have been going down nothing but nihilistic rabbit holes on YouTube and watching everything I can about quantum physics because I no longer think there's a God. And I came out on the other side of it going, all right, I might have been a little hormonal or something, and like my faith was stronger on the other side of it because frankly, it was because I confronted so much evidence to make me doubt and then came out still believing. It made me stronger in what I believed.
Yeah, I would
So
agree.
I think doubt has I think doubt is a necessary and important part of faith, and that it strengthens you.
That is true. If you're just blind, you're just going through the motions. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. I like her background.
Yeah.
Very
wait.
Northern Lights.
Here we go. I'm going to bring up Jean-Marc next. Ask unmute.
Hello.
There we go. Wait, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Jean-Marc.
There's always
How about now?
There we go.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Bridget, Ben, thanks for having me on. Big fan of the show. Been following for a while, and I feel like there's a similar trajectory from an Xer to an Xer where I started out on the left and have kind of been pulled from left of center to somehow now more right. So it's been really, really cool watching you go through this. Anyway,
thank you.
I wanted to talk today
before you
about...
say anything, I just want to tell you, I make ads, and if you don't start doing voiceovers for ads, you're missing out.
You know, if my email's listed on here, go ahead and shoot me an email. I'd be happy to help. My dad always told me I've got the face to radio.
Voice.
You can send it to me privately, Jean-Marc.
Okay, will do. So I grew up in the church, and after many years and many books have sort of found myself teetering between agnosticism and atheism. And I now in my 40s land pretty comfortably in agnosticism. And part of it is, me personally, as I start to see the different world religions, they all seem to focus on this vague idea of how not to be a dick, right? Especially the Abrahamic faiths. And what I wanted to talk about specifically now is the differences I see in being Christ-like in one's actions as a Christian, and how I see that differing from the Christian nationalist ideologies that tend to cherry pick ideas that suit political or social ends. And I'll give you a for instance. I'm one of those weirdos that likes to use the internet to have conversations with people when I can, one-on-one. And I have a smorgasbord of friends from that I've collected through my years in the military, through my years living throughout the country, and so forth. And some of my evangelical friends have been really, really vocal during this last election, and seeing the kind of things that they post, I'm like, okay, well, I want to engage with you and see, what do you mean by this? And I did the same, during the Biden years with when people posted defund the police. I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean by this? Help me understand. At any rate, so one of my friends and I were talking about the verse in Matthew 25, which is, I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. And then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did you see the stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did you see the sick person and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, that as you did it to me, as one of the least of these of my brothers, you did to me. I butchered that there. I apologize. Cold read. But they want to focus on the section in 40 that says, as you did this to the least of my brothers, you did this to me. And the inference there being, their argument is that meant fellow Christians only. Everybody else excluded from this. Mm-hmm. And I see that mentality that differs between being Christ-like, showing mercy to the poor, showing, sympathy to the widow, and clothing the homeless, feeding the hungry, helping the stranger, helping the immigrant. And then what Christian nationalism does and pushes back against all of these things. I mean, let's take a look at the famous example during Katrina, where that massive megachurch was shut because they just redid the floors and wouldn't take in people as refugees, right? And I wanted to get your take on that, Ben, and how people of Christian faith can reconcile that when there is, to my eyes, evidence of Christian nationalism that is present in the current party and the administration, and a lot of the ethos that's on the outskirts of it that's propelling it into power, and how that differs from what the teachings of Christ really center around.
Well, actually, this is like a huge aspect of what I wrote about, because what I was talking about at the time, and what I still believe, is that there's a fundamental problem with a lot of Christian nationalists, which I fully believe that is what a lot of people have become. It is the belief that the country, the United States of America, is vital for God's plans, that whatever happens in the future, America must exist. And this gives a lot of Christians on the right over the years, has given them sort of free reign to say whatever we have to do in order to make sure that America continues to exist because God needs us. And there's a fundamental flaw in that, which is that God doesn't need us. God doesn't need America. Like we should do everything we can to be a great nation. We should do everything we can to be aligned with like the greatest of human values. But it is not our responsibility to make sure that America exists so that God can fulfill whatever it is he wants to do. He's never going to be up in heaven going, oh my gosh, my plans just got ruined because America fell apart. It's just whatever happens is his plan. So I find Christian nationalism to be, even as a Christian, I find it to be very dangerous. I think it gives people too much excuses to be able to do anything they want in the name of doing a higher good. There's this thing called moral hierarchicalism, which is where, you're starving and you don't have any access to money and you're going to die, and you see some bread on a counter, and so you take the bread and you eat it. Okay. Have you committed a sin? Well, you have, but you prevented a greater sin, which was to just let yourself die when you had a means of saving yourself. So there's this, you know, a lot of people look at things like that. Well, if you put America up at the top of everything, then just about anything you want to do can come underneath it. You could, you know, rape, murder, and steal. And as long as you're doing it allegedly in the name of progressing the United States of America, you're serving God's will as long as you believe God, that the United States has some holy mission. So that was basically what I wrote about.
So, I mean, those are pretty extreme examples, right? But I mean, in talking about the everyday ethos that I personally, as somebody, see in elements of MAGA, how do those two things square up, right? Between the difference between trying to be Christ-like as a Christian and then saying, you know, screw all immigrants, you know, removing the humanity from the situation and saying that Audi.
Well,
And
people have just become very compartmentalized in a way that's unhealthy. They, you know, they compartmentalize by way of saying, you know, yes, I'm a Christian, but I'm an American too. As though these things, if they're at odds with one another, they will somehow do both. And, you know, you can't. You have to prioritize things. Even if you're not a Christian, you have to prioritize things and know what's most important to you and what are you going to protect before anything else. Most people would say like their family comes first and then maybe like their job or something like that. And for a Christian, it's supposed to be their faith first. So if they are betraying their faith in order to turn away an immigrant, then I would say no, they're sinning, even
so
if it was best.
so then my question to that would be, why is there not, if there is, I don't see it because I'm not in those circles, but why is there not more pushback from the non-Christian nationalist Christians when they see the weaponization of their faith for these means?
I'll tell you exactly why, and it's very sad and unfortunate, but true. They have a seat at the table of power. And if you have a seat at the table of power, you don't call out the person who's letting you sit at that table. So if the administration, for instance, was to do, I'm not saying they are, but let's say they were doing something that the church should be against. There's a lot of churches that wouldn't feel comfortable calling that out just by virtue of the fact that they won't be invited to be at that table of power anymore.
Well, that seems like a neglection of faith.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
It definitely is.
All right. Thank you, John Mark.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you for tuning in.
Yeah, likewise. Ha ha ha.
All right, and message me for your contact info. Ben can get you some work.
Yeah, I can get you some work.
All right, next I'm going to bring up Kathleen.
I see a lot of hands right
There are a lot of hands. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to everyone. Oh, what happened to her image? She was just on screen. Kathleen, can you hear us? All right. Oh, wait, there she is. Okay, we need you to unmute. There we go. Oh, but she's frozen. Uh-oh. All right, we'll try and come back to you, Kathleen. I'm going to bring up Michael Lee next.
Sorry, Kathleen.
Sorry. Yes.
Can you hear me? I can't see anything. Like I said,
wait.
my internet sucks. No, my question was really about like women's religiosity. You know, I personally speaking, I'm not like a churchgoer, but my whole life I've always prayed. And even though as an adult I really, really tried to be an atheist, I guess I don't have like, I'm not smart enough to like logic myself out of the existence of God. So I just gave up, you know?
That's really where I land.
Yeah. But my thing is that like throughout all cultures and times throughout human history, women have always naturally been the more religious between the two sexes. And I'm wondering, like, does anybody else notice, like, in terms of like when women leave normal religions like Christianity, when they go to like feminism or hedonism or trans ideology, has anyone else noticed like the religious zealotry when they adopt these new, like a new way of thinking? Like, Have you
I mean, I don't
noticed,
know that
like,
this is gendered. You know, I'm not sure that it's a it seems like this is something I think about a lot. Is this kind of like religious gene that we have that we all have to, will we just become religious atheists, or will we start proselytizing about something else if it's not God? I think
mhm.
women um I I yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Ben, what do you think?
Um, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. What do you think?
I
I don't know that women are more, you know, we were looking up all these studies right before we came into, we
mhm.
actually do prep for this, believe it or not. And we were going back and forth in the writers' room and in the chat about like all these studies about Gen Z women, young women. Women are getting actually less religious. They're turning away from the church in that sense of the word. And the real big divide that you're seeing is actually between men and women, just all across the globe. And one of our writers was joking that the two parties in the future are going to be men and women. Like that divide is just accelerating. Essentially, men are all going to the right, women are all going to the left. And I'm not sure what to make of that. You know, I
Yeah, I'm
don't.
hesitant
But I think
to say my views on a lot of it because I I
I
I,
think
I
I
go ahead.
think part of that actually speaks to women's religiosity, like our natural religiosity. Like once leftism becomes a woman's new religion, she's the most viciously devout defender and follower of the leftist faith. You know,
Yeah.
once a woman becomes a feminist, she becomes the most viciously virulent defender of feminism. And that's what
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
I
Like,
mean,
Yeah.
we do, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if there are studies. I don't know if it's if are women more religious. We do create life, so
yeah. But
there is
that in
like
and
that
of
all
itself is a
powerful
spiritual experience.
instinct.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, like, do you think that maybe adopting these new religions is, I don't know how to put it. Like, I'm sure that like a lot of aspects of feminism are really bad for society, but I still don't want to give up my right to vote because I have a soon to be military age son. I'm not about to let somebody else decide who tells my son if and when he goes to the draft. I'm not giving that up. But at the same time, I really feel like a lot of parts of feminism, of like hedonism, Antifa, all of these things, the zealotry behind it is fueled by women, but the actual actions of it are more carried out by men. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
women are the vocally violent ones and men are the physically violent ones. But I think that because for whatever reason Christianity has become really unappealing to women over the last century, I think that's what's driving. Like we're supposed to be the faithful ones. Like throughout history, most of the religious priest class was like one priest and a bunch of priestesses before, you know, Christianity. And even in after Christianity, the main converts were originally women who spread Christianity by birthing and raising Christian sons who then went on to spread it even more. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But like
Yeah, I
I
mean,
just
even in these,
I
this is
don't.
something that I didn't understand, even looking at like Islam and having people like Yasmin Mohammed and talking to them. It's often women who are the morality. They're the ones who are like ratting everybody out and upholding these very harsh morality clauses and principles and laws that they have. You would think that
Yeah.
it wouldn't be, but they're often the most radical in that
Mhm.
sense. Um, uh,
Yeah,
and
well,
you have,
yeah, I think part of that is because of how important social cohesion is just to the physical survival, your physical survival as a woman. It's an instinctive thing to kind of try and keep everybody in line and on page so that any potential backstabbers are dealt with before they actually have the knife in your ribs. And in order to do that, it requires the guilt, shame, and rallying, but you need a justification for it, which is where religion comes in.
I mean, I think women are evil. No, I'm just kidding.
And on that note, all right, I do want to
Yeah.
try and get to at least one more person.
So much.
Thank you,
You've given
Kathleen.
me a lot to
You
think
too.
about.
Thank you, Kathleen.
It made me think of my stand-up routine that I'm trying to work out.
Way to end it on a high note, Bridget. All right, I'm going to bring up Michael Lee.
All right, thank you. So,
Hi,
Bridget,
Michael.
thank you for hosting this topic. This is my first time here, and I heard the topic, and I thought, oh wow, this is so great. I've been thankful today for the curiosity, the humility, and the nuance that we're able to have in this conversation, both with the spoken word here and then in the chat. So, this has been therapeutic for me and my faith journey. So, thanks for that.
Of course.
My question is for Ben. Ben, I'm curious, do you see any expressions of faith or religion in American society today, whether engaging with business, government, or schools, that show signs of potential to you that you're encouraged by because you see they're doing it for the right reasons? And before
Yeah.
you answer, I'll just say where I'm coming from. I'm Gen X, so I'm a recovering Catholic too, Bridget. My dad's a gringo, but he married a Mexican woman whose first language was Spanish, and she tried to make my little brother and I good little Catholic boys, and she failed miserably because our dad was a fun alcoholic, and that's what he modeled. So when I was a senior in high school, on my way to becoming an alcoholic like my dad, some Christian kids invited me to their church, and I went just because of the pretty girls. But I heard a message that night that rocked my heart.
Wow.
I didn't know I had a spirit until that night because something spoke to me, and I said, "Whoa, maybe there's something more going on." So instead of the big party college that I was already enrolled to go to, I ended up going to a Christian university because I wanted to search out Jesus and the resurrection and Christianity for myself, which I did. So I call myself the accidental theologian because I got a degree in Bible while I was there. But I live in Seattle, Washington, and I was a business owner there for 15 years. And boy, you want to talk about a hostile environment for your faith and your views? I could write a book on that. But that's a little bit of my background. I'm curious, Ben, to hear what you see as far as faith or religion interacting with American society in a way that's encouraging to you. And I hope there's something.
Well, there is, although it's not going to sound too encouraging at first. What I see, what I've seen over the last, I guess you could say most of my life, was a slow dismantling of Christian faith in America. I just saw the church falling apart, and I saw Americans getting farther and farther apart from one another when it comes to faith becoming more relegated to the dustbin of history is what it felt like was happening. But one of the things I talked about in my book was that the culture for a long time was sort of managed by churches and local churches and community and things of that nature. And that if church steps out of that role, if God in America steps out of that role, something will fill it. And in my opinion, over the last 10 years, something has been filling it. And I think that as it's been getting filled, more and more people are starting to say, I liked how it was before. I'd like to move backwards from where we are right now. This is not going in a way and in a direction that I like. And this recent revival that Bridget was talking about with Charlie Kirk's assassination is a perfect example of people getting pushed over the edge of that moment where they're just like, you know what, I've had enough. I'm ready to believe in something again. I see people moving from nihilism to idealism every day now. And I think that nihilism is a defense mechanism for people who are sad and don't know how to reconcile their sadness. So they just try to feel nothing. And when something as shocking as what happened to Charlie Kirk happened, it just jerks people awake. And so in that sense, I think this horrible tragedy has helped highlight for me what I've seen for a long time, which is that the culture had gotten away from feeling good about itself, and I feel like it's starting to move back in a good direction.
I mean, even just how many of the videos that we have of his that people can go watch. I saw one just today. I basically watch one every day, and he was talking about how the Holocaust, and somebody said the Holocaust doesn't make them, they lost their faith in God, and he said, well, the Holocaust is like made me lose faith in man. And it was this weird way of presenting it that, again, never occurred to me. Never. So I think, again, even it's like this, his message now people are tuning into. I mean, I saw a woman, and she was kind of a dyed-in-the-wool liberal who was curious about this person because she'd never heard of him. Because we do have like a siloed media system now that's really intense, and you can have no idea something's going on in another media silo if you're in one silo or the other. And she started, I mean, she was crying in this video and saying basically that it had woken her up. It got her back into Christianity. She was completely wrong about this person. It made her start questioning everything. I don't think that she's a single example of this. I think there's a lot of people who feel empty, meaningless, hopeless, and then this thing happened. And even if they're not necessarily Christian or on the right, they've been attracted to this message by sake of what happened.
I mean, there's no doubt that feeling something feels better than feeling nothing. And I think that for a while people have been feeling nothing, and they've been filling it with materialism and secularism and humanism. And I think that when the real beauty of the world starts to get lost on people, they didn't even notice because they're just lost in that nihilism. And you have to get jerked awake somehow. And I think sometimes that happens through tragedy. I hope it keeps happening. This, we've talked before, Bridget, about how there was a resurgence in faith after 9/11 as well. You know, and these things can happen in cycles, and those cycles can end. But it is a pleasant resurgence that I'm seeing anecdotally in my life, looking just even at people around me, my friends, and I mean, you, Bridget, like I've known you for a long time, and I don't know that you would have used the word my faith when I first met you.
Yeah.
And yet here you are saying it.
Yeah. I mean, part of it too for me has been sobriety. So it's like as that's unfolded, there's been I've had to open myself up to new ideas. But yeah, I often joke I will be wearing a cross telling people to find Jesus by the time I'm ready to leave Texas. But
well, thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. All right. Well, it's 7, guys. There were so many of you. We can't get to all of you. We're so sorry. Ben, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a lot of reasons for hope right now, which is not something I would have said
ever.
Yeah, I mean, a couple
ever
of years
since
ago,
I've known you.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, if some, like, no joke, if somebody had said, "Well, you need to have hope," I'd be like, "Who do you think you are?"
That was kind of something I said to you. You did say that to me.
How dare you tell me to have hope? And now, like, I think it's actually becoming. It's weird how it was spurred by tragedy, but there's so many optimistic things that I'm seeing right now. Now, it could all end with people on horses with burning crosses, shooting arrows in people's heads and telling them to convert to Islam. I have no idea. But, it at least right now, it feels good.
Right. Bridge.
That's it. Where can we find you in your book? And what is your book?
You can find my book, The Immoral Majority, in basically on Amazon at this point, because it came out a few years ago. And you can find me on Twitter, where I don't really act like a Christian. And
No one does
you,
on Twitter.
yeah, and that's basically it.
I love how
Everything
it was
else is-
it was like everyone was feeling forgiveness for like 48 hours. Even Jimmy Kimmel last night was like forgiveness, and today it was like civil war is here. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, that didn't last.
Look, like I said, after 9/11, George W. Bush had like an 89% approval rating. Like, just think about that. Think about who he is, who he's been in history, and the fact that he had that high of an approval rating at the time. It was a lot of hug, hug, kiss, kiss. But I will say that this time, what's different is that it was more like civil war. It was within the family. This was an American who did this too, you know? It wasn't 19 foreign hijackers so that we could all just like rally around our Americanism. This
Right.
happened here, and there were a lot of people who celebrated it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just very different.
I was just gonna make the most inappropriate joke, and I'm so
like
glad
a dozen
I
of them
didn't.
hit me at once as well.
Okay, it's time to pull the plug. I
Here's
know
the
that.
other thing that I did want to talk about is how hard it is to be a person of faith and earnest and also funny. Like
Yeah.
earnestness and comedian, they don't really, it's like not,
No,
it's
and
not
I'm snarky and like I love nothing more than the perfect insult, which is also not exactly very Christian.
Mhm.
But like, you know,
Yeah,
I
you
like
like to roast.
I like to fight,
Yeah.
you know, and like that's not, you shouldn't like that. I'm not supposed to like that, but I do.
Well, we'll need you in the next Crusades.
Yeah, they are here.
God.
All right.
On that note,
Thank
all
you,
right,
Ben.
everybody. It's been a whirlwind.
All right. Let's pull up your end here.
All right, everybody. Thank you to our guest, Ben Howe. Thank you to those of you who showed up and asked questions. Awesome discussion. You've given me so much to think about. And thank you to Two Way and their amazing team. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Bridget.
And thank you, Quest, for sponsoring this show. We can't do this without our sponsor. So visit questhealth.com and use the discount code RealMade25 to get 20% off your purchase. That's questhealth.com, RealMade25 for 20% off. Join us next Wednesday, October 1st at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Now, if you are on this Zoom, it's the same link every time. I think what I want to talk about is what is mainstream media. Now that could change given the, you know, news cycle, and a week from now we might all be surrounding an oil drum fighting over rats for food. But in the event right now, I'm feeling like talking about what is mainstream media now, because I'm really interested in that question and what you guys are. So get your thinking caps on, start thinking about it. All right. Thanks for getting real with me, guys. I'm Bridget Phetasy. Don't forget to tip your server.